Hello and welcome to episode 156 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet and my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is September 26th, 2022. Today I'm wearing a fairly old shawlette and a not quite as old jacket, but nothing new. The little shawlette was a mystery knit along by Susanna IC. It was a winter mystery knit along. I forgot to write down the pattern name, but it's linked underneath the video. And I think this was one of the knit alongs where you could choose between several sizes. And I chose the small size because I only had one of those, one ball of this color. Could have been a subscription color back then, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, I didn't know that it would be this deep and rather short. So I don't think it's a perfect size, but still it's a very nice one. But I've always wanted to knit the same pattern in a different size, preferably the biggest one. And maybe one day I'm going to do that. One of the things I love about this little shawl is the fact that it has lots of beads. And again, I chose beads that are the same color as the yarn, so they are hard to see, but I still love the fact that they are there. And yeah, so if I knit the big size, I will definitely put in beads again. Maybe I would choose some that have a bit more contrast to the yarn. I don't know, but anyway, it's a nice little shawlette, and I love wearing it. The cardigan I'm wearing is the Hitofude pattern. It's a Japanese pattern, and the special thing about this pattern is that you can knit the whole jacket or the whole cardigan in one go without ever having to cut the yarn. So it's a very clever construction. This is the second time I've knit the pattern, and the first time I knit it I used alpaca yarn, and I used I think 9 50-gram balls. So I had to weave in lots of ends, but this time I got Wollmeise lace yarn, and that was a is it 150 grams or is it 300 grams? I don't know, but it's one ball of yarn and it has lots and lots of yards on it. So I knit the whole jacket with this one ball of yarn, and I actually only had to weave in 2 ends, the beginning and the end. And at first I thought I was going to knit the whole yarn, but it was just too much. This is already fairly long, and it would have been too long if I had knit the whole ball of yarn. I did the sleeves longer than the pattern calls for, but I'm also very happy with that decision. The neckline is always very wide. That's because of the construction. I think I made it a bit narrower than it is written in the pattern, but I'm also happy with the way this worked out. Yeah, so that's what I'm wearing today. And then on to finished objects. I have 3 finished objects. I'm talking about my work of the last 3 weeks, as I had 2 weeks of holiday and I didn't film a podcast. But also because of the holiday, I actually knit and crocheted a lot less than I usually do. So, but you'll see in a moment. So I have 3 finished objects and 3 new cast-ons. So that's, yeah, about. One of the finished objects is not technically finished, but you'll see in a minute. I'll start with the oldest project. That's the Viva Vittoria square that I crocheted. The pattern is called Kaboom by Shelley Husband out of her book Granny Square Patchwork. This is one of the bigger squares, and then the book contains squares in different sizes, but they still fit together. So there's one size where I have half the size of this square, and there's one size where I have a third of the size, so I can crochet 3 of the other and sew them to this if I want to. But for the Viva Vittoria thing, where I'm going to donate the square, they ask for squares that are 50 centimeters wide, and then they are going to sew 4 of them together, and then they'll have this happening in Darmstadt where they want to draw attention to the topic of violence against women, and then they're going to sell the little blankets that they sew together and donate the money. And this is the first square that I did for this organization. And last time I showed you, I'd finished crocheting except for the last round, and I hadn't blocked it yet. So I blocked it, and it blocked out almost to 50 centimeters. So while it was wet, it was bigger than 50 centimeters. And then I just straightened it up and I let it dry. And then when it was dry, it was a bit smaller than 50 centimeters. So I'd been debating whether to do single crochet or double crochet for the last round if I needed another one. And what I ended up doing was doing a round of half double crochets or half trebles. So that brought it to exactly 50 centimeters. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's one of the Rainforest colors by Opal. It's the DK weight sock yarn, the 6-ply. And yeah, can't wait to crochet more out of that book. But for now, this square is done, and I'll talk a bit more about the knit-along at the end of the video. The next finished object is my Lechfall top by Nicola Susan. It's this interesting pattern where you start at the back, and you can start with any yarn, any gauge, and when you reach a certain size, you cast on more stitches for the sleeves and the front, and then you have this interesting construction where the back looks a bit like a raglan, but the increases happen more often, and then the front is completely different because you increase for the front but not for the sleeve, so that's quite funny. And I finished it, but I haven't washed and blocked it yet. I haven't worn it yet because the weather just turned too cold. So it didn't make sense to wash it on holiday, so I'll do that at home. For the sleeves, the last time I talked about this, I was thinking about just casting off straight away. I did that, but then I cast off a bit too tight, and the armhole was just a bit too tight. So I undid that, and I added 2 rounds and did a very stretchy bind off, and then it was too loose, and it was doing this thing. Can't think of the word right now. So I didn't like it, so I undid it again, and then the third time I cast off, I just cast off normally and tried to do it a bit more loosely, and then that was fine. I did that for both sleeves all 3 times. And otherwise I just knit the second ball of yarn. I basically just knit down the front and back, no shaping, and I wanted to have the last color repeat in the ribbing. That's what I did. And then when I thought I had enough yarn to cast off, I cast off the stitches with the very stretchy bind off because I didn't want it tight on my hips. And I ran out of yarn, about 20 stitches before I was finished. So I undid the whole cast off, and then I did the same as with the sleeves. I just cast off normally, but a bit looser than normal. And now it's great. So this week I want to wash it. I'm not really going to block it. I'll probably just lay it down to dry. And then next week, if it's not too cold, I'll probably wear a long sleeve t-shirt or something underneath if I can find something that works with this. And then I'll try and wear it as what I'm wearing in the video. So that's the second finished object. And the third finished object, I'm not quite sure whether it's still a mystery at this point, because it's the 10th Mystery Gnome by Sierra Shawl, which is also part of the Year of Gnomes. I just realized I haven't filled out the form for that yet. So I finished the first gnome that I knit from this pattern, and as I'm saying the first, you already know that I've started a second. So all the clues are out, so I'm not quite sure whether it's still a mystery. If you don't want to see it, you have to look away now because I'm showing it now. But I don't think it's a mystery still. So this was the Choose Your Gnome Adventure pattern, which meant we had lots of options for the body, lots of options for the hat. There were 2 different noses, 3 different beards, 2 different options for the arms, and this is the little version, so you could also choose between medium and large. This is the medium size, knit out of fingering weight yarn. The hat is hand-dyed yarn by Woldackel. The nose and the hands and part of the beards are white opal yarn, and the green is out of their Beauty series. It's that really soft yarn. So it's a really soft, cuddly gnome. He has a little stripe between hands and arms. It's not very visible, but it's there. And then I went for the 2-color beard with the fringes, with the fringe, and I'm really, really happy. I think if you did the 2-color beard, the pattern says to use the body color, but I prefer to use the hat color. But that's, I think with every gnome, you can just do what you like and choose your own, make your own decisions. But especially with this Choose Your Gnome Adventure, I felt very free to just do what I like. So I went for those 2 colors, and I really, really like the way he looks. This is Norton, I think is his name. So it's a 2-color body pattern. For the hat, I went for the 1 color because this is already very colorful. And I just added the garter ridges. Yeah, so this is another finished gnome. Then on to works in progress. As usual, I'll start with the socks, and last time I only had 1 pair of socks on the go. This has changed. So the socks I was working on last week were these socks out of opal sock yarn. This is another color in the 2 colors out of the rainforest series. I keep thinking the other color is a solid color, but it's not. It's those 2 colors out of the this year's rainforest color. And I think last time I was knitting on the foot, I finished the sock. I did the star toe, which I like. It's not the one in the pattern, and the stripe, the contrast color stripe in the toe, that's in the pattern. And I also had it before I knit the heel, and I did 1 stripe. I did 2 stripes with no pattern before I started the pattern on the sole, so it sort of repeats. And I'm really happy with how this looks, and I've started the 2nd sock. Haven't done a lot, but I've knit enough that you can see that the colors come out completely different, which I think is great. I really like that. So that's the 1 sock that you already know. And then 2 of my new cast-ons are new socks. And the next sock that I cast on are the Springfield socks by Tanja Lüscher. And I test knit the pattern for her. And it's a very fun pattern. It has this frilly top of the sock. That was the reason that I did a very short sock, because then it looks quite funny to have that looking over you, out of the shoe, on top of the shoe. You could knit the socks longer, but then I felt this would sort of be in the way. So I am thinking of knitting the pattern again with a longer leg, but then without this thingy that I can't think what it's called at the moment. But anyway, after you finish that, you have a little bit of ribbing with a tiny little cable detail, which is fun to do and looks nice. And then you have this really wide rib on the rest of the leg, and then on top of the foot. I used a color inspired by one of Hundertwasser's artworks. So it's a very bright color. And then I choose to use the solid orange for the beginning, and I chose the solid purple for the heel and the toe. And for the test, I only had to knit 1 sock, which I finished in time to fill out the form and to officially finish the test, but I haven't finished the second sock yet. So I finished this orangey bit, so I've decreased the stitches already. I was using leftover yarn. I was a bit worried it wouldn't be enough, but it was enough to finish that. And now I can, I'll go back to the colorful yarn and knit the second sock. The color stripes will be different, otherwise I'll knit them the same. And the third pair of socks that I started, or the second new sock that I started, is part of my sock couple. Every year for I think 8 years now, I knit a pair of socks for her and a pair of socks for him, and I give them away as Christmas presents. And I started with her socks this year, and I'm knitting the pattern Treppenviertel socks by Nicolor Susan. Now Nicolor is the name that she publishes her patterns, and her name is Nicola. Nicolor and Nicola. Nicola Susan is her name, and she designed the Lechfall top that I showed, but she also designed this sock pattern called Treppenviertel, and Treppe is steps or stairs, and it's an interesting pattern that has sort of a rib pattern on this side that goes this way, but then if you look on the other side, those ribs give way to ribs that go this way, and then for the top of the foot you just keep knitting this kind of rib. So it's a fairly subtle pattern, especially with a colourful yarn, but I like it, and I've always wanted to knit it, so this is the first time I'm knitting it, and I will knit at least 2 pairs, his and hers, and maybe I'll knit a pair for myself as well, I don't know. The heel is fairly high, and it's different from normal, or it's different from the way that I know these heels. So the way the heel turn is knit is different from how I am used to knitting it. And it means that it's a fairly high heel, so there were lots and lots of decreases to be knit. But I think it looks good, and I hope it will fit well. By the way, I forgot to mention that with the Springfield socks, they have a different heel as well. So this starts off with a bit of a, what do you call that bit of the heel, the back of the heel? And then the decreases here are again different from what I am used to. So it's very rare for me to knit 2 new heels in 2 pairs of socks at the same time. So I thought I knew most of the heels, but now I know 2 more, which is quite interesting. The yarn I'm using for this sock is out of the Schafpate series from this year, and his socks will be another color from the same series. I always pick 2 colors from the same series for the sock couple. So that's all the socks that I'm knitting at the moment. And then there's another new cast on out of sock yarn. And for that, I have to show you a book. I was sent this book by the Stiebner Verlag, publisher. The publisher is called Stiebner. They publish lots and lots of knitting and crochet and craft books. And they sent me this book to look at and to review and to knit from. So that's what I did. I read most of the book. I love reading knitting books. And yeah, so this has mittens and gloves. Never know what the difference really is, but it has this kind of mittens where you have the whole hand covered. Then they have the fingerless version, and there's also like little cuffs or little wrist warmers in the book, and they are all knit with lots and lots of colors. So there's one page here where you can see like the full mitts, the fingerless mitts, and then these little like cuffs or wrist warmers. And then the patterns often repeat. So sometimes the little cuffs will have the same pattern as part of the glove. Like I think you can knit this as a little wrist warmer. Yeah, these are some more of the patterns. There's some explanations what the patterns are supposed to mean. I didn't think that was too interesting, but still. And then there's one other very interesting fact. They sometimes have the same pattern like here and here, and the full mitten will have the colors one way, and then the fingerless will have the colors reversed. So this has a dark background and a light pattern, and this has the light pattern, the light background and the dark pattern. And then you even have the little wrist warmers using the same pattern as the mitts. So that's really interesting, I think. There's one more page I want to show you. So this has another overview of some of the patterns that are in the book. They're really nice. I think you can see most of the patterns on Ravelry if you're interested in the book. And you have some patterns with lots and lots of colors like these and this. And sometimes you only have 2 colors. Most of the mittens have at least 3 colors. Like I think this and this. These are typical 3 color versions. There's more than 3 colors in this one, but you could use less. So it's a really interesting book. One thing I was a bit surprised at is the fact that they use a lot of stitches. So most of the mittens are knit with 70 or 72 stitches or sometimes 68. And I find this a lot. I usually use less stitches if I use sock yarn, but then I think the original yarn that they use is probably a bit thinner than sock yarn. So one interesting way of knitting those could be to use lace yarn. Didn't even think about that. I knit mine with sock yarn, but I used smaller needles than I usually use to get them tight enough. And one other way of handling it, one could use sock yarn and then do one pattern repeat, omit one pattern repeat to get 60 stitches or 64 depending on the pattern. So these are things that I've been thinking about. Another thing about the pattern or about what they write in the book is they insist on using double pointed needles, and they say that for these patterns other needles won't work as well, and I'm not quite sure why. So I like to do things as per pattern. So I'm knitting the first mitten on double pointed needles with the number of stitches in the book, just using very small needles. But I think the second one I'm going to knit on a tiny circular needle, because that's what I prefer for color work, because I find it easier to get the strands loose enough with a tiny circular needle. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of magic loop anyway, but with magic loop I find it difficult with the floats when you change from one needle to the other. Then I prefer the double pointed needles. So the pattern that I picked to knit are these, and I liked the motif, I liked the way it looks, but originally I wanted to reverse the colors the way they are in the full mitten. So I wanted the dark background and the light pattern, but then because I wanted the shape of the fingerless mittens, I looked at the wrong pattern when I looked at the wrong page when I started knitting, and the colors I chose to use are the dark blue this is the alpaca socks, and the new alpaca socks yarn by Hansa Farm, which gives you the same gauge as the normal sock yarn. And the light color, I went for this opal color out of the Memories series. And as I said, the idea was to have a blue background and the light contrast color, but then I looked at the wrong pattern and I started knitting the wrong way around. And by the time I noticed what I was doing, I didn't want to undo it anymore. So it starts off with the dark color, and then with this, I basically have the dark background and the light pattern, but then it changes and I didn't notice, and then I decided it's okay. So I finished the main part of the first mitten, or yeah, fingerless mitt, and I have not knit the thumb yet. So I've picked up the stitches so I could put the hand in and try it on. It is fairly wide, as I said. I think these are 70 stitches, but I don't think it's too bad. So with mittens, I think it's better to have them too big than too small. And the size is really nice. So this part is long enough, this part is long enough but not too long, so I can move my fingers, so that seems okay. Yeah, so now I need to knit the thumb and then I can do the second one. And for the second one, as I said, I want to use the tiny circular needle to see how that works out, and I want to reverse the colors. So I'll start the same way, but then I'll try and remember to do the dark background and the light patterning. We'll see how that works out. So that's all the new cast-ons. Then on to the projects that you already know. And the next one I want to show you out of sock yarn is the Pokapoka Hat, out of the new book that I bought in Düsseldorf. And I continued knitting with the rainbow color on the yellow background, and still loving how this comes out. And I brought the other yarn. So the second half of the hat, I want to use the mohair silk yarn by Hansa Farm, and this is going to be the other half. So I can either have this color and the mohair as the when I fold it over, or the other way around. I can have the mohair hat and then just show the rainbow on the edge. So that should be a lot of fun. And then the baby surprise jacket. By the way, I remembered to bring the book, The Complete Surprise. So there you can knit all the different versions. This is the original baby surprise, but you can do the whole onesie thing. You can have a pullover or a dress. This is a little scarf that teaches you the increases and decreases. This is for a bigger child, or you can even do a grown-up version. You can do the stranded color work version. I love these. I'll have to knit one of those. I've knit a grown-up version for myself years ago. I've planned another one also years ago, so maybe someday. So I did quite a bit of work on the surprise jacket using this 6-ply opal yarn. So this doesn't look like a jacket at all, but if you know what to do, you can just fold it this way, and then suddenly you can, oops, if you do it right, you can see that the sleeves are done. I've just cast off for the neckline, and yeah, this is going to be a nice little baby jacket. I want to finish soon because I hope the baby should have arrived now. I'll probably find out on Wednesday. So that's the baby surprise jacket. Then the pullover I'm knitting for myself out of sock yarn is that's another color out of the Beauty series by Opal, and this is the Go Big or Go Gnome pullover by Sierra Shawl. And I think last time I showed it to you, I'd already started knitting the gnomes, but I was still on the bodies of the gnomes. So this is the little mushrooms on the bottom of the front and back. These are the sleeves with no pattern. And I finished the gnome bodies and started the hats. So now that the weather's getting colder, can't wait to finish this and wear this. Yeah, so this is all opal yarn. Yeah, little gnome, not little, but a big gnome pullover with little gnomes on it. And staying on the gnome theme, I showed the finished gnome for the Choose Your Gnome Adventure Gnomes, but I told you I was going to knit another one, and I wanted to use the what's it called? Westfalenwolle. This is German yarn from German sheep. That's produced and created in Germany and sold in Germany and now knitted in Germany. And this is, I don't even know if it's Aran weight, or I think it's bigger than DK weight. But yeah, and I chose to knit the big gnome, but I've made quite a few changes to the pattern for this gnome. One change is that it's a bit shorter than it's supposed to be, because I was worried I'd run out of yarn. So the hat is basically the big size, except that it's a bit shorter. And then I knit the body. I started off with fewer stitches because I ended the hat with fewer stitches. And then I increased, I think, to the number of stitches I was supposed to have. And I improvised the stripes. So there is a two-color version in the pattern, but it's different from mine. And I just decided to do it this way because I think it looks quite funny. And again, I'm a bit worried of running out of yarn. So that's the main reason I have the light stripes in there. I have no idea yet how tall I'm going to knit the body. Depends a bit on the yarn, depends a bit on my patience. Yeah, but I started the hat on double pointed needles, but then I switched to the short circular needle, and this is all I have from the dark color. So I'll probably knit the body as far as this yarn goes, and then I'll probably do the bottom of the body in the light gray, and then I'll have to see what to do for the arms. Maybe I should knit the arms first and make sure I have enough dark yarn for the arms. Or he'll have to have light grey arms. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. But this is my second version of the Choose Your Gnome Adventure Gnome that I'm still knitting on, and I haven't made all the decisions, as you could tell. Then I continued knitting on the vest out of the Coco Knits book. Out of this Lana Grossa yarn, and I finished the fronts. I finished knitting basically the armhole. I don't know how to explain that. And so this is the first time I knit this pattern, and I wasn't quite sure how this was going to work out. So when I increased for the back, I thought this was more than wide enough to have as a bag, but I hadn't realized that in sewing together the first and last so many stitches, I was sort of creating tiny little sleeves, so the back would end up being a lot smaller than I thought. But I stopped increasing also because I didn't have enough yarn. So I have knit up, I think, 4.5 balls of the 6 that I had. So there's one full 50 grams that I can add on, and then I have a bit left that I will probably use to cast off, and then I'll have a little jacket, little cardigan or vest with no sleeves. So yeah, it's quite interesting. It's I like the construction. It's interesting to figure things out, and I'll have to see what it looks like when it's done, and then I'll decide whether I keep it or I'll give it away. And then there's one more project I worked on. Everything I showed you so far was knitting, and the only crochet project that I took with me on holiday were tiny 10-gram minis by Opal to crochet those small squares. I did not bring the Talavera blanket because it was just too big to carry around. So I brought some of those minis. I think I took 4. I only crocheted 2, and both times I ran out of yarn. So with this one, I still have to finish this bit to get my 9 rounds. And with this one, there's only this tiny little bit missing. So I'll have to finish them. And just because I haven't shown it in a long time, those 3 were probably lying around from the last holiday. And all the squares are going to end up in this blanket that I basically just started because I had so many 10-gram minis left with green in them that I decided to make a green blanket. And not all of the yarn is from mini skeins. This is a glitter yarn, that I had a leftover. This is one of the Black Dragon yarns that I had a leftover. Ball. Yeah, so that's the last project that I actually worked on. I do want to make another Viva Vittoria square to donate, but I haven't started one yet. So yeah, I'll let you know next week what I have decided and show you what I started. That's everything. I knit, mostly knit, tiny bit of crochet during the last 3 weeks. I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!